Joan Didion once wrote, "A single person is missing for you and the whole world is empty." When I heard about David, that's what I thought of. Suddenly the world was so much emptier than it has ever been. The last couple of days, so many people have said to me, "What a nightmare. What a nightmare." And struggle to find the words, struggle to express the despair, the shock, the grief. And that's where we all are. Karen just said, "I can't believe how many people are here." And it reminded me, I don't know, I think David has something like 3 million followers or something like that. We should have invited them all and had a parade out in front on the street. You know, what's life about anyway? How long you live, the impact you make. It's like anything you say sounds like a platitude. It sounds like a cliche at this point in life. It was Shakespeare who famously said, "Give sorrow words, the grief that does not speak whispers the o'erfraught heart and bids it break." Give sorrow words. So I've been a rabbi for literally 46 years, and I don't have the words. I've never found those magic words that somehow make it better, that somehow make the grief less painful, that somehow ease and truly bring comfort. I guess it's my own failing, but I never found those words. I don't think there are those words. I guess it's why poets write poetry, to open our hearts and go, "Oh, there's a word, there's a thought. That's right, that touches me." To me, David was a walking poem. He was a living poem. He was extraordinary. I mean, anybody who knew him, all of us who knew him, that's why there are no words that could capture him, even though we're going to share a bunch of words in just a moment when I stop talking. But David was, what do they call it? A goat? Right? That was David. Greatest of all time. Great. He was like a nova, that thing that just burned so brightly that it lit the world. I mean, literally the world. He was everywhere. I mean, world traveler, that's what one of his like monikers is, world traveler. Advocate for those who needed advocacy. Spokesperson for those who didn't have a voice. You know, he was David. He was remarkable. He was a gift. Certainly to me, to my community, my congregation, my family. I think about David when he was, in middle school and high school, and how he came into himself. One of the many times he then blossomed and came into himself. That was one of those times when he stood up and started advocating for his own uniqueness and what that meant, and then proceeded to go from school to school to school to school, explaining to everybody what it was like to be him and how they should react to people like him, and why the things they thought weren't really the way it was, and this is the way it is, and this is why we talk this way, and this is why we don't react that way, and this is why we react this way, and this is who we are, and this is our humanity. This is our uniqueness. This is our specialness. This is our spirit. This is our soul. This is our worth. This is our value. Even though it may look a little different than what you expect or how you are. Extraordinary. And all of us were like jaw-dropping in awe of David and his eagerness to stand up in front of people and talk and share and open himself and his heart. It was unbelievable, really. Never met anybody like that. Exactly. Would have made a great rabbi. Gifts are words. And in spite of how impossible it is, that's why we're here. This is what we do. We, in the Jewish world, we gather together and we share words. Because we also know that words matter. As David knew, words matter. And you can't remain silent when you need to speak up, to speak out. Before I start inviting up all the speakers who are here, there is one other thought I wanted to share. Jewish tradition has this kind of counterintuitive notion in the Talmud that says the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth, which sounds ridiculous to most people. But when the rabbis talked about it, they said, well, what's a baby? You know, a baby is born, yeah, we love the baby, but who's a baby? All potential. No idea. You look at a baby, I've said this a million times at baby namings, we have no idea what she's gonna say, what he's gonna do, the lives he's gonna touch. It's only at the end of our lives, whether short or long. It's the end of our lives that suddenly we go, oh, this is what that person is. This is who that person became. These are the lives that person touched. These are the words that came out of his mouth. These are the gifts that he shared. This is that unique, special soul that came into the world that as a baby at birth, we had no idea, but at death we do. And so we're here to share that, to share those words and how he touched each of us who are going to speak in our own unique way. There's a whole contingent from camp here because camp was so important to David. It was another one of those moments in his life when he flourished to the next degree, when he came into himself in a way he hadn't before, even though he was amazing before. And we're privileged to have Rabbi Saposnik, the director of the camp here, to share some of his thoughts and memories of David with us.
Psalm 23, which we often recite at funerals, begins with the words Mizmor LeDavid, a song of David. A few verses later, it says, Kosi Rivaya, my cup is overflowing. And I've always found it a bit strange that we should talk about such joy and abundance at a moment like this. And yet, when I think about our David and the song that we might sing of his life, it is exactly that feeling of overflowing joy that comes to mind. Almost a decade ago, one of the first blog posts I ever wrote was about David. And it started like this. Before David first arrived in camp, we spoke with his parents about his autism, how it might impact his experience at camp, and what their goals were for him, both during the summer and beyond. They were incredibly open and realistic, and we were upfront about what we could offer. And while we all hoped for the best, I must admit that I entered that first summer with a bit of trepidation, worried that we might not be able to live up to all of our expectations. Boy, was I in for a surprise. David jumped headfirst into the camp experience. He participated in all of the activities, loved all of the food, always had a smile on his face. He shared his love of basketball and brought us the tradition of chocolate breakfast, which still is there all these years later. And every year, I have to say, when I walk into chocolate breakfast, I picture David's exuberance, even though he knew it was coming that first time he walked in the room. A week or so into that session, his first year, I showed up in our Teatron, our theater, to hear David talk with 50 of his peers, our 9th and 10th graders, about autism. We knew his bar mitzvah speech had been on that topic, and he had spoken about it in other places, and he really wanted to share it with us. Now, our campers are incredibly kind, amazingly aware that everyone is different and has their own gifts to bring to the community, and even so, surrounded by a group of teens, I was worried that after a great first week, David's positive experience could end when he stepped to the microphone. And then he began to speak. And you could feel the excitement in the room. There was laughter at the right times, good and thoughtful questions, and when he finished speaking, thunderous applause. As everyone got up to leave, I watched David giving high fives, smiles, and huge bear hugs to his friends. What I learned in that moment, and have seen in so many ways in the years since then, is just how deeply committed David was to his friends, to his community, and to being the best he could be. And he made all of us better in the process. A Reconstructionist educator who couldn't have spent more than a few weeks over the course of many years at camp with David said that David was a teacher to many. He loved the way David openly spoke about his autism and how he seemed to find ways to make others feel better about who they were. And a former camper beautifully summed up so much of how I think about David's time at camp. She wrote, "I can't imagine anyone being at camp at the same time as David and not having fond memories of him. He had such a joyful presence and would treat anyone like his good friend with such wonderfully overwhelming enthusiasm. And for those who were lucky enough to be among his closest friends, watch out. He would move heaven and earth for them." Rabbi Jeff Eisenstadt, the founding director of camp, who met David before I did, shared with me this weekend about the first summer he spent with David as part of a pilot camp program on the West Coast. A staff member was hired to be David's shadow for the program, and they remarked that 11-year-old David beamed so brightly that we all were in his shadow. At the risk of being cliche, how lucky we all are to have stood in the shadow of David's greatness. In that blog post all those years ago, I shared a note Karen sent to us. "We're so happy that David has a place he can go and feel comfortable, make friends while being himself. Camp is his home away from home. We believe his camp experience is preparing him in so many ways, and we are grateful beyond words to you and your staff for giving him the opportunity. To tell you the truth, I'm grateful to you, Karen, and you, Syud, for giving us the opportunity. Having the privilege of learning from, laughing with, and just knowing David has truly been a blessing for me and for so many of us. Mizmor LeDavid, a song of David, Kosi Rivaya, our cup overflows with the joy, the friendship, and the spirit David's memory will continue to shine upon us for many, many years to come."
Like I said, he should have been a rabbi. The last time I was here, standing here, was for David's grandfather's funeral. So I wear this, which Harold gave me. It's so appropriate because David adored his grandparents, Harold and Myra. They were role models for him in so many ways, not the least of which was their ability to stand up and speak out when they felt it was necessary to speak and to be poets. And so it's appropriate to have Myra come and share some poetry with us. All right. Okay. Maybe taller.
Oh,
Stand on
do I
that.
need to be taller?
You can stand on that if you want.
Where?
Do you want me to?
Oh, yeah, that'd be good. That'd be good.
No, you're taller.
Ooh. Yeah, thank you.
I'm not leaving you.
No, you know, you never do. Um, talk about words. That's what we were. And David surprised me one day by saying, I'm writing poems. Oh, I said, that'll be nice. That's wonderful. Bring them over. And he did. And the thing that was amazing, and what we just heard, is he had these stages in his life of being ornery when he was little and wanting his way. And then it amazed me as he could come to a time where he wanted to hear somebody else's opinion. He wanted to share, and he would take in. And so I loved it when he brought poems, and I would say, oh, for instance, the example, I said, what is the name of your collection of poems that you have now? And he said, oh, the strength of my condition, maybe, or I said, well, the word strength, is there a punchier word? And I mean, it didn't take a half a second, he said, oh, the empowerment of my condition. And that was it. What better title? The empowerment of my condition, which has a photograph that Ben took for him of a skyline view of New York to match David's empowerment, is what we thought. And I want to read two poems from this collection. The first one is called Ball Game. Grandpa was a Yankee. Mom is a Brave and Cub. I grew up a Dodger. Played second base and center field for a team called Texas Rangers. Kept score for my synagogue softball team called Boy Chicks. Begged Mom to get Dodgers tickets every summer in the upper decks behind home plate with Dodger dogs, popcorn, and a helmet of fries. Learn the lesson. Be prepared for the unexpected. Accept failure. Stay in the moment.
I feel like we should applaud every time you
I
do
know,
it.
yeah. I applaud David, and we hear. I mean, this is how he made his way. And the next to last poem in the book, it was hard to choose. His love of sports, his love of people, his love of camp. There's a poem in here called Camp Havaya. There's a poem in here called something about best friend, dedicated to Sam. And this poem, intend, connect, attain. I visualized a puzzle of 500 pieces. I was surrounded by kids like me. I sat on the grass. I contemplated strategies to express myself. I wanted to match the pieces together. I presented my autism speech, okay? I got outstanding remarks and gave countless hugs, okay? I asked questions to learn about the friends I was making. I solved the puzzle. I learned to listen. I bonded with amazing friends from all over the world. I have more puzzles to solve. Yeah.
Okay, keep going. Yeah, one more step. Careful. All right. In a way, David kind of defied the odds. Well, not in a way, in many ways, he defied the odds of the challenges that he faced in his life. And one of the ways he defied the odds was to make so many friends, because it's not easy to make friends. It wasn't for me. Still, to this day, it isn't easy for me. And yet David was like, oh, want to be my friend? It's like, and then you want to be my friend? And you need to be my friend? And of course, everybody said yes, because who wouldn't want to be his friend? So it's fitting to have friends share some thoughts. So I'd like to invite Sam and Aviva to come in. No, Aviva's coming too. Trust me. Did you put me in charge or not? Just check.
Yeah, okay. I'm just saying a quick thing. You said to me earlier that us camp people were a light in his life, but he was truly a light in ours, and I think I can speak for all of us when I say that, and that he will truly be missed. And his passion for camp truly kept us very connected, and I know that he would be happy to know that even now he's bringing us together. So I'll turn it over to Sam.
Good afternoon. No, not such a good afternoon. I'm Sam, Frolichstein-Appl, speaking on behalf of many of these camp friends who are here. David often referred to me as his long life best friend, LLBF for short. And this is not what that was supposed to mean. Like so many people here in person virtually, I first met David at camp. We were in Sharif Tavor together in the summer of 2012. And while he and I didn't bond immediately in that first week that Isaac was talking about, that was Paul. It's maybe his first camp friend. I quickly saw the personality and the passion and the love that David brought to everything he did. He lived so fully at camp all the years we were there together as campers on staff, that he would always be exhausted at the end of the day. He would make sure everyone gave him the space and quiet he needed to get a full night's sleep, and did not like being disturbed. His first summer, as Isaac mentioned, he showed his My Name is David animated video to our unit. And from that moment, our community's love for and understanding of David became much, much deeper. A story about David and camp. In summer of 2014, David and I and many of our dear friends were traveling through Israel together. And towards the end of the trip, we went on a tour of David Ben-Gurion's home in the Negev. Many of us were exhausted. We were party animals, falling asleep on our feet, not paying any attention to the kind of pill of the tour guide who was showing us around. Not so for David. He was paying attention. And when we were asked at the end of the visit what we had learned about the man, David was the only one who had an answer. He said that he seemed to be on top of things, organized, put together. Well done were the words that David used. And we knew what he meant, but the tour guide did not. She shrieked, "David Ben-Gurion was not a steak!" And we thought that was hilarious. We all started laughing. Not at our David, because we knew he had given a genuine answer when nobody else was about to, but at this old woman who was futilely trying to teach us things. But David didn't like that. He made it clear to us that it didn't feel good to him. He thought we were laughing at him, and we understood. We stopped. We listened to him. David and I quickly discovered after meeting that we shared many interests, from subways to sports to chess to Pixar's animated masterpiece, The Incredibles. One of the ways he related to people was through the lens of well-known characters. I was the Frozen to his Mr. Incredible, the Ron Weasley to his Harry Potter, and many other roles, some of which I knew and more of which I did not. David was much more well-versed in cinema than I, and even when I had seen a movie he was talking about, I never remembered nearly as much detail as he did. We played seemingly endless games of chess together, from Pocono nights after long days at camp to iMessage games that would go on for days. More often than not, I won, but it didn't matter as long as I heeded his warning not to gloat. which I did for the most part. We had a few arguments. When we were in Israel, I foolishly tried to convince him that Derrick Rose was better than Kobe Bryant. And after that, he did not let me live it down. But he bought me a Derrick Rose jersey for my birthday that I still wear with love to this day. As we know, David was an accomplished advocate for himself and for others with autism. I was always excited to listen to a podcast episode or watch a panel in which he spoke, as he eloquently talked about growing up with autism, coming to camp, attending PACE, and working. An amazing friend that he was, he saw a parallel in my experience as part of a documentary and podcast that my uncle made about celiac disease. While I might not have seen my advocacy or my struggle in the same way he did, it's a strong kind of love I felt when he'd ask me about whether I appeared in any podcast lately. More than sports or movies or advocacy, though, David was a fierce friend to me and to so many others. One of the ways this manifested was his never-ending quest to visit all of his friends' childhood homes. And boy, did he keep track. He knew where people lived and who had visited whom, and if anybody talked to him about travel plans, he'd ask if they were going to visit our peers who lived or had once lived nearby. Last summer, he finally had a chance to visit Chicago when I was there, and we had a lovely weekend together exploring the city, going to the beach, seeing friends, and hanging out both at my apartment and at my childhood home, also with his family, which he really delighted in. He had been working toward that for years. And we had been working on plans for him to come back and visit this summer. It breaks my heart that he won't be there. In lieu of that, everybody here is invited to come watch The Incredibles in Chicago. Sometime around his birthday, May 28th. Details to be determined, so let me know if you're interested. Karen, Syud, Ben, Myra, I speak for the entire camp community when I say that we lost a member of our family too. We're shocked, reeling alongside you, and grateful that we had the opportunity to know David. And we're here with you and for you in any way that we can. David, Mr. Incredible, my long life best friend, not lifelong, long life. Goat, I miss you already, and I love you always.
As David would say, Sam, well done. Joseph Colella has his own special relationship with David, so it's a privilege to invite him to come.
I stand here today to pay tribute to a brave soul, an immense heart, a fiercely loyal friend, and a disciplined mind, a person I've called a brother, David Sharif. I struggle to put into words the impact David left on my life. Often when you open a history book, a significant figure can be summarized by their notable achievements and maybe some basic details. Not David. There are no words that can encapsulate who he was. What really could tell you about him, though, was one of his great loving bear hugs. And that's something I know most of us in this room could use right now. My heart's aching to wrap my mind around the world without him. Even from the brief times they were able to meet, my parents have constantly asked, "How's David doing?" From the research projects. You couldn't pull them away from David's presentation at our Dyson Fair. Even 3 years after we graduated, you couldn't get an answer from them as to what my project was about. And as somebody with mildly forgetful parents, I hope you know the significance of them having him at the front of their minds. He clearly left a mark. At PACE, David was involved in everything, and I mean everything. There's a saying, don't half-heart two things, whole heart one thing. David wholehearted everything. I would love to read through his resume here, but we'd be here until the sunset. One of his heroes was the Black Mamba himself, Kobe Bryant. David mentions him in his book, The Empowerment of My Condition, and shares a quote from him, "Love what you do." And that's exactly what David did, and it showed. Anyone to cross paths with David in his many positions can tangibly feel the love that David put in everything he did. Not one movement was made without love, passion, and drive. The thing we all know is that David had an impact in each of these positions that some of us can only dream of. David stood up for what was right and had not one hesitation in letting you know about what that right was. If there was one thing that had always stuck out to me, it was David's unwavering love for his grandfather. We shared our pains from losing our grandfathers, and we talked about how much their lives impacted our own. If there is a comfort, I'm imagining his grandpa's getting a good old David hug right now. I spent yesterday evening reading from David's book. There's a quote in there that stuck with me about his friend Sam, and he was right, "You are handsome." Our endless camaraderie went beyond inconceivable odds. We will always be together. Life is great when I vision you in my dreams. I'm looking forward to meeting up with David in a dream and catching up with my old friend. I will forever cherish him and his courage to stand up for what is right. And I know that his commitment to good has inspired us all to do what is right, especially if it is not easy. David was a righteous man deserving of his namesake. He was a tireless champion for justice, finding his way into different causes that didn't directly affect him. He was an ally, a friend, and a hero. I imagine David's having a sly smile on his face, knowing that we have big shoes to fill and an even bigger heart. I want us all to take the time to think about how we can help fill that hole. I love David, and I hope that you know that we're all here for you and your family. I will keep David, you and your family in my prayers, and the precious memories we have of David will far outnumber the tears we will shed, and they can never be taken away. I'm grateful that the Lord gave us David, and may he rest in peace. Thank you.
You know how much the family is grateful for you, Joseph, and your relationship and what you brought to David too. You know, I always thought how lucky David was to be born into this family. He could have been born into any family, but he got you guys. And because he got you guys, he became who he was and who he continues to be forever. The Shapiro Sharif family itself is a one-of-a-kind family. And every one of them has their own unique specialness, their own light, their own heart, their own tenderness, their own gentleness, their own love, and their own tears. And today's got to be the hardest there is. There is nothing worse than this. There is nothing harder than this. And that's why everyone's here. Because even though we know we don't have the magic words to make you feel any better, we know the one thing we can do, the only thing we can do, and the thing we're supposed to do is show up. That's what there is to do for all of us. Just show up, as all of you have today. And I can tell you, in case they forget, they are so grateful that you all showed up. Because this is what tributes are. It's showing up. So I know how hard this is, Syud. I know how impossible really this is for you, but I'm going to invite you to come up anyway. I'm going to invite both of you to come up, in fact.
Well, I'm here to represent.
Okay. Then I won't have to.
Thank you.
Take a breath.
We are living through the most heart-wrenching experience that any parent can live through. I had the misfortune to see my parents live with the pain when we lost my brother Zahid as a toddler to an accidental death. And then when my mom passed away, to see my father witness his firstborn, my brother Saad, die of cancer. Never had I imagined that we'd be living through this same pain. Children are not supposed to die before their parents. David is a blessing in our lives. He made everyone around him better with his magnetic personality. His determination and motivation in life was matchless. Quite early in his life, David was diagnosed with autism and had to live through countless hours of physical therapy, speech therapy, and being with skilled specialists. We were told that the most he would be able to achieve was a high school certificate. But when David saw his older brother Benjamin leave home to go to New York University, he was determined to go to college. He worked so hard that not only did he get his high school diploma, he was the valedictorian of his graduating class and the only student to go out of state to a four-year university. David got accepted to 4 universities, and he chose Pace University in his favorite city, New York. Again, he astonished everyone and graduated magna cum laude in 4 years. David had dreams to go to grad school and once again wanted to prove the doubters wrong, just like his idol, Kobe Bryant. There are so many memories that are rattling in my head that I'm at a total loss how to piece it all together to paint a beautiful picture of David. He was an avid advocate of autism. As you've all heard, for his Bar Mitzvah project, he wrote a speech and delivered about his being autistic, so that others could benefit from it. Matt Asner, who was at that time with Autism Speaks, made an animated video of his speech, My Name is David, and is viewable on YouTube. Please watch it, share it with others so that his message stays alive and it reaches his goal of 1 million viewers. David immersed himself in being an autism advocate. He raised funds last year for the Global Autism Project and was scheduled to go to Kenya this summer with a team of doctors, clinicians, and therapists to support programs that would help autistic kids. As you all have heard, he published a book of poetry titled The Empowerment of My Condition, and was writing a book about how Camp JRF, now Camp Havaya, transformed his life. He was a true ambassador of autism. Just this last week, after 2.5 years of COVID isolation, David, Ben, and Myra were in Los Angeles to celebrate Passover with us. And on Tuesday, we dropped them off at the airport. He gave us his big bear hug and kissed us goodbye. On Friday, he was invited to speak at his alma mater, Pace University, to talk to the students with autism about the benefits of study abroad. David loved to travel and discover the beauty that surrounds us. He so much enjoyed learning new things and was living his dream life independently. David often spoke about having a relationship to share his life with, just like Ben has Galen. He always emulated his role model brother. Alas, that dream was not meant to be. There is so much we want to share with you, but time does not permit. We would like to close with this poem. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am in 1,000 winds that blow. I am the softly falling snow. I am the gentle showers of rain. I am the fields of ripening grain. I am in the morning hush. I am in the graceful rush of beautiful birds in circling flight. I am the starshine of the night. I am in the flowers of bloom. I am in a quiet room. I am in the birds that sing. I am each lovely thing. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I do not die. We are grateful to everyone here and those watching us, to all our family and friends for their outpouring love and support, for giving us the strength, and most importantly, for keeping David's passion alive. Goodbye, my love.
I figured out the magic words. This sucks. Syud just said, made reference to David's role model brother and how lucky he was to have this role model brother. And it's just as hard for Ben to try and speak about his brother as it is for Syud and for Karen, because they had a very special relationship, a one-of-a-kind relationship. It's a heavy burden. It's a heavy burden that you have carried for his whole life, to show up for him and with him. That's not easy. And I know there were times when it wasn't easy. And you showed up. And especially why he wanted to move here and when he moved here. You were like an anchor for him. So many ways, even more than you know, frankly. Having you here was like grounding, foundation, safety, in so many ways. So I'd like to invite you to come up and share some thoughts.
I wrote an email last week to a non-speaking autistic advocate who my mother and I had connected with for a documentary that we're working on that was inspired by David. In the email I wrote, quote, "David being born was the best thing that's ever happened to me." And I meant every word of it. The number of lessons he's taught me is immeasurable, and I am not the person I am today without him. I believe we are an interdependent species, social creatures, and I can't help but believe that David was shaped by all of you as well. You know, his community of friends, family, colleagues. And so I thank you all. His room is filled with dozens of photos of everyone. He kept everyone who he loved around him, everything that was important to him. The outpouring of our heartfelt messages my family and I have received over the past few days has been truly tremendous and a testament to how easy David was to love. I was there last Friday when he presented about his study abroad experience at the Oasis program at Pace, and I'll never forget that feeling of pride that overcame me sitting in that room. I felt that often with regards to David. It was really hard not to. David is the most driven, dedicated human, and when he set his mind to something, he'd accomplish it, constantly proving doubters wrong. He was proud, yet humble most of the time. And a fierce advocate. He appeared on a handful of podcasts, as has been mentioned, and published articles, and in even a chapbook of poetry. And I encourage you all to listen to them, as he has so much wisdom to pass on and even more to say. I even had the privilege of recording an episode with him about our relationship, our sibling relationship, on the SJ Child Show. He referred to himself as a motivational speaker, community moderator, and neurodiverse mentor serving the world of autism. Serving the world of autism. He was acutely aware of how often autistics are underestimated and made it his mission to ensure that autistics worldwide would live to their full potential. I imagine him having an extremely competitive free throw shooting contest with Kobe Bryant. And that's an understatement. And sharing bear hugs with his grandfather and literally anyone else who wanted one. He had so many great quotes to accompany all the photos of his friends. So many quotes. And they escape me now, except for one. And I have no idea where it came from. He could have come up with it. It could be from a movie. He said, "If you fill it, you earn it. If you waste it, you'll lose it." David did not lose his life. He filled it. And may we all follow in his footsteps. Thank you.
I was one of David's Facebook friends. And if you're not, you're one of the only people in the world who isn't. So, Ben, his profile in Facebook says not just motivational speaker and community moderator. Of course, you know, it says prolific writer and world traveler. Humble, is that what you said? So we could be here all day for many reasons, one of which is I'm not going to, but I could invite you to share your own David stories, because I'm sure you all have them. But I am going to invite you to share your David stories with his family in any way that you can, email or however you can communicate with them. You can even write it and put it in a mailbox or something, or any way that you can do it. Or you could join at the Shivas and then you could share the stories there, because that's what's going to happen there. Anything else you want me to say? Okay. Because they really want to hear these stories. This is your gift to them, is to share David's stories. And the more they hear about your experiences and your memories of him, literally the deeper their connection, relationship, and with their own son and brother and grandson become. So please do that. Join the Shivas. They'll be extraordinary, I'm sure. A bevy of clergy will be participating. 13th century Sufi mystic Jalaluddin Rumi, one of my favorite Jews, who wasn't really Jewish, but I always wished that he was, once wrote, "Goodbyes are only for those who love with their eyes, because for those who love with their heart and soul, there's no such thing as separation." And that's really the fundamental truth of life. So the last thing I'm going to say, never believe a rabbi when he says that. I just realized. But the last thing that I'm going to say is, what death is and what death is not. Because yes, we know that what death is that you can't get the bear hug that you long for anymore. You can't see him the way you saw him, touch him, hear him the way you could. He was walking here with us. But what death is not is the erasure of a human life. Because the truth of our lives is that our relationships are really not about the physical presence of those we love. Relationships are the most intimate experience we have of what we mean by spiritual. They are spiritual. Once you have a relationship with someone, when you love someone, when you care about someone, that's not about their physical presence. If that were the case, every time our loved ones left the room, they'd cease to exist for us. We know that's a ridiculous thought. Whether they're in the room next door and we don't see them, whether they're across the country and we don't see them, whether they're traveling around the world and we don't see them, whether they're no longer physically on the planet and we don't see them, our relationship isn't diminished at all. In fact, often it's the opposite. Our relationship becomes that much more intense, that much more precious, that much more that we long for and cling to and fills the very fabric of our being. And that's our relationship, all of us, with David. Because nothing, not even death, can ever take that away. In our tradition, we have special prayers that we recite at moments like this. And one of them is the El Mole Rachamim prayer. And so we're going to conclude here in this chapel with the chanting of the El Mole Rachamim, keeping with Jewish tradition. If you can, I ask you please to rise for the El Mole. El Mole Rachamim shochen bamromim, Hametzei menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, b'malot kedoshim utaharim kezohar arakia mazhirim, et nishmat David ben Tzipora v'Sayud, shalach le'olamo, began eden tehei menuchato, lachen ba'al harachamim yastireu b'seter kanafav, la'olamim. V'yitzror b'tzror ha'chaim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuch b'shalom al mishkabo, v'nomar amen. Source of life and death, eternal spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to David Sharif, who has entered eternity. God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be thou his possession, and may his repose be peace. As together we say, Amen. Please be seated.